Hey, my name's Izzy. This is Rolling Virtual Cards, coming at you with another good enough commander deck. This time we've got Y'shtola Knight's Blessed damage and cards. CEDH level. So for those fans who like CEDH, you'll enjoy this one. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like the deck. If you hate the deck, double subscribe. So hit the subscribe button, unsubscribe, and then hit the subscribe button again. So that's how you double subscribe. So don't double hit it. That's a 3 times hit at least. So, but let's get into it. Y'shtola, I think that's how you pronounce it. Y'shtola Knight's Blessed is 1, a white, a blue, and a black for a 2/4 Cat Warlock. Vigilance. At the beginning of your instep, if a player lost 4 or more life this turn, you draw a card. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. Now, why is Y'shtola considered... I don't want to say it's considered CEDH. Why is it playable in CEDH is what I want to say. The reason being is twofold. One, it's an Esper. I guess it's 3 parts. It's an Esper. Any Esper commander, even if they're not great, can probably be considered viable in CEDH because Esper is just a great package. Okay. 2, that draw a card whenever at the end step, draw a card if the player lost 4 or more life. Sometimes players might just end up losing life anyway, but you can trigger this yourself pretty easily with 2 cards being, I think it's Mana Crypt that deals the damage. Not Mana Crypt, Mana Crypt's banned. Mana Vault. Yeah, if it's tapped, I think it's the one that's tapped. You take you lose a life at your upkeep, or do a damage to yourself at your upkeep. And then the other one is, I forget the name of the land. There's a land that you tap that deals 3 damage to you, so that's 4 damage to you. So you'll draw a card at least once on your turn, which is small, but still something. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, that 3 or greater deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you gain 2 life. There is a win con with that as a backup, which is fine. Okay, and that small amount of damage for playing good cards that are 4 or higher isn't bad. Okay, but mainly it's a control deck. CEDH is not really in that position right now. It's kind of mid-range hell, and control isn't great against mid-range. But I think we're slowly getting enough cards that are one-sided. The issue with stacks in CEDH is you don't want it to affect you. It needs to evenly affect all 3 opponents to slow them down. The problem with stacks, though, is that one of the 3 opponents have to remove it. And if they remove it and don't win that turn, then the next person doesn't have to worry about that stacks piece anyway. So, there are problems with stacks. I still think a good pilot can do pretty well with this deck, but let's get into the 99. Teferi Time Raveler is 1 a white and a blue for 4 for loyalty. Teferi, each opponent can't cast spell or can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery. Don't just play this card willy-nilly. This card's here to stop your opponents from casting spells on your turn so you can win. But also, it's +1 till your next turn. You may cast sorceries. Oh, they had flashes. Okay. But the main part is it's -3. Return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand. Draw a card. This, Displacer Kitten, and a Soul Ring. Not a Soul Ring. A 0-drop artifact. Go infinite draw. So, you cast... Actually, I guess Soul Ring does it. So you cast Soul Ring, triggering Displacer Kitten, targeting Teferi. Teferi flickers, triggering Teferi's effect. So you can use Teferi's effect, or resetting Teferi's activation, so you can -3 him again, returning your Soul Ring after tapping it for 2, drawing a card, and then casting the Soul Ring, flickering Teferi, returning the Soul Ring, infinite. This draws your entire deck and gives you infinite colorless. So it's a simple win con, and since this is the non-creature with mana value 3 or greater, you can just... Well, you're actually not casting Teferi in this regard, but if you can do this with infinite color mana, eventually you can... Actually, you can't win that way. Yeah, so that's not a way... Yeah, you won't infinitely cast Teferi yet. Technically speaking, there is a way to do that eventually with the right cards, but if you're drawing your entire deck out, you'll win with Thassa's. Unless Thassa's gone, in which case, yeah, that's a backup. And we'll show the backup when we get to them. But 23 creatures. Hate bears, a lot. Esper Sentinel is 1 white for a 1/1 human soldier. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, non-creature spell, or cast their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless they pay X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. This gets you a lot of draw, both early game and late game. Late game, with all the people casting spells, you're going to at least draw, like, probably 3 cards off of that off your opponents, which can help you stay in and stop people from winning. Archivist of Ogmog is 1 and a white for a 2/2 halfling cleric with flash. Whenever an opponent searches their library you gain a life and draw card. People are tutoring all the time in this format in CEDH, and then on top of that, just like fetch lands even is a tutor. So, good draw. The accidental life gain is duly liked. Containment Priest is 1 and a white for a 2/2 human cleric with flash and a non-token creature. Would enter the battlefield, and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. This is a very good way to stop certain combos. Not all combos, but certain combos where you're not casting creatures, like you're flickering them and stuff. It doesn't hit everyone, but it hits enough of decks you might see that it's not bad to play. Dauntless Dismantler is 1 and a white for a 1/4 human artificer. Artifacts your opponent's control into the battlefield tapped. This severely limits a lot of stuff, especially LED lines, because they can't tap the LED. It comes in taps, so they get messed up with that. They got to remove it first. And then even if they try to, you can pay double X and a white to sacrifice to destroy each artifact with mana value X. So you can pay like 3 to just pop all the 1 drops, or 0 to pop all the 0 drops, which is good. You can just go, no, we're just going to not let that happen, which can be very problematic, especially like if you do this. Yeah, you can do some decent things. Dothi Voidwalker's 2 black for a 3/2 Dothi Rogue. Shadow, so it can't be blocked by shadows, but it can't block other creatures that aren't shadow, or it can't be blocked except by shadows, and it can't block except for other shadows. If, one second. Sorry for that, I choked a little. So if a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. Tap it, sacrifice Dothi Voidwalker, choose an exile card an opponent owns with void counter on it. You may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. So you do have to, I think Dothi does worry about timing, I think. Yeah. But being able to like have good selection, like you can choose a counter spell that someone cast off Dothi, there's a lot. It makes your opponents have to stop and think on what they're doing. Dreadeth Magistrate is 1 and a white for a 1/3 human wizard. If your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hand, this just stops people from casting the commander. Fairy Mastermind is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Fairy Rogue with flying and flash and flying. And whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. And for 3 and a white, or 3 and a blue, each player draws a card. Technically, if it in mana, can just deck your opponents out or draw you the game. It's not the best choice. Unless you have like a Grand Abolisher, which is 2 white for a 2/2 human cleric. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells, activate abilities, or of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So, very good way to stop your opponents. Doesn't stop everything, mind you. There's a few ways around that, but Fairy Mastermind is also just kind of a good way to draw some cards. Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff, is a white and a black for a 2/1 halfling rogue. And whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you lose a life and create a treasure. This includes you, but getting a lot of treasures, even for life, is good. This just kind of keeps you going. Orcish Bowmaster is 1 and a white, or 1 and a black for a 1/1 orc archer. Flash, whenever it enters the battlefield, or whenever an opponent draws a card, except the first one they draw on each of their draw step, Orcish Bowmaster deals 1 damage to any target, then amass 1 orcs. This pops any X1s, and it's insane how much it's changed CEDH, because any black deck running it just runs you into an issue of like, oh crap, I can't really run X1s. All my little mana dorks are going to die. So, very good in that regard. Polywog Prodigy is 1 and a white, 1 and a blue for a 1/3 frog wizard with evolve. So whenever a creature with more power or toughness into the battlefield, you put a 1 counter on it. And whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than Polywog Prodigy's power, not equal but less than, draw a card. Your commander does have 2 power, so it does buff it by 1, getting it so that the 1 drops will get you there. But you can usually get it a little higher if you got the right cards, I think. Thassa's Oracle is a win con. 2 blue for a 1/3 Morfolk wizard. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library, execute devotion to blue, put up to 1 of them onto the top of the library, and the rest on the bottom of the library in a random order. If X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you draw a card. You win the game. So, pretty good. Your devotion to blue in this deck can be pretty high because of your little hate bears and stuff. Voice of Victory is 1 and a white for a 1/3 human bard. With mobilize, whenever it attacks, you get to create 2 tapped 1/1 red warrior creature tokens, sacrifice them at the beginning of your next end step. And that's not why you're running. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. That just kind of helps you win the game. Archeon of Emeria is 2 and a white for a 2/3 Archeon. Flying, each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn, and non-basic lands your opponents control into the battlefield tapped. Simple enough. Being able to just stop your opponent from casting too many spells. One spell a turn is fine for you, and non-basic lands coming into the battlefield tap slows your opponents down. Opposition Agent is 2 and a black for a 3/2 human rogue with flash. You control your opponents while they're searching their library. While an opponent is searching their library, they exile cards. They exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exile, and you may spend mana as though or mana of any color to cast them. Yeah, Opposition Agent just steals people's tutors. You get to choose, and you get to cast them. And you can spend and you may spend mana as though or any. Yeah, so you can just use any color. So that's pretty good. Rogue Ranger Captain of Eos is 1 and 2 white for a 3/3 human soldier. When it's the battlefield, choose your library for a creature with converted mana cost 1 or less. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And you can sacrifice it. Your opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn. That second part is a way to stop your opponents from winning and also to protect you, win for you. But then on top of that, the 1-drop you grab Esper Sentinel. So that's kind of cool draw engine there. Timna the Weaver is 1 a white and a black for a 2/2 human cleric with lifelink. Whenever, or at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that were dealt combat damage this turn. Draw X cards. So up to 3 life can be paid to draw 3 cards. Roaming Throne is 4, so this does not trigger your commander because it's a creature. But it's a 4/4 golem with ward 2, and when it enters, you choose a creature type. When the chosen types is so thrones are the chosen type in addition to its other types, and if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen trigger type triggers, the trigger triggers an additional time. You choose your commander with this guy to double trigger. So this double draws you on your end step, and then double drains your opponents, which is good. I like it. The double drain is technically 4, so that'll trigger your commander, which is kind of fun. Shieldred the Apocalypse is 2 and 2 black for a 4/5 Phyrexian Praetor with Death Touch, and whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. And whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. This is just a good way to slowly drain your opponents. Spark Double is 3 and a blue for a 0/0 illusion. It enters the battlefield as a copy of creature or planeswalker you control, except it enters with an additional 1/1 counter on it, or if it's a creature, an additional loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker, and it isn't legendary if that permanent is legendary. You have this guy come in as a copy of your commander to kind of just do the same thing that Roaming Throne is doing, which is more draw, more damage. Talion, the Kindly Lord, is 2 a blue and a black for 3/4 fairy. Noble with flying. When it enters the battlefield, choose a number between 1 and 10. You usually just choose 2. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value, power, or toughness equal to the chosen number, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. 2 is the right choice usually, and that just gives you good draw cards and a little damage. And that little damage adds up in this deck. That's kind of the point. Hullbreaker Horror is 5 and 2 blue for a 7/8 Kraken Horror with flash. This spell can't be countered, and you may cast a spell, or when you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So the point here is you just constantly cast spells, so you can just flicker between everything, or you can just flicker your stuff. Being able to just combo with like a 0-drop artifact and your soul rings so that you can get a bunch of mana and then just kind of win the game. Because once you have infinite mana, Hullbreaker Horror works with just any 4-drop non-creature to win the game off of your commander. And Hoarding Brood Lord is 5 and 3 black for a 7/6 dragon with Convoke, so your creatures can pay tap to cast it. With flying, and when it's the battlefield, search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. For each card, for as long as the card remains exile, you may play it. Spells you cast from exile have Convoke. That is kind of like just the creature package right there that does its job. Quick adjustment. Displacer Kitten was just added. I thought it was in the deck already. My bad. A 3 and a blue for a 2/2 Cat Beast. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent you control, then return to the battlefield under its owner's control. It doesn't combo with your commander, but it does work for an infinite with your Teferi. So that's pretty good in that regard. Sorceries. Imperial Seal is 1 black for a sorcery. Search your library for a card. Shuffle that card, put it on top, lose 2 life. That's just a good tutor. Demonic Tutor is 1 in a black for a sorcery. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Demonic Tutor is great if you don't have a way to draw a card for a seal, Imperial Seal. It's a way to just get a card and win the game. Diabolic Intent is 1 in a black for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sack with creature. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. This card's actually pretty good with Archeon because you can sack the Archeon so that you can cast more than 1 spell. And it does go into hand, so that's pretty good. Yawgmoth's Will is 2 and a black for a sorcery. Until the end of turn, you may play cards in your graveyard as though they were in your hand. Cards put into your graveyard this turn are removed from the game instead. This just kind of gives you that little push to try to win if you have cards in your graveyard. Beseech the Mirror is 1 and 3 black for a sorcery with bargain, so you can sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or a token as a cast this spell. Search your library for a card, exile face down, then shuffle. If this spell was bargain, you may cast the exiled spell without paying its mana cost. If its mana cost, if the spell's mana value is 4 or less, put the exile card in hand. Otherwise, you can go grab any 4-drop that kind of just helps you win the game, or the One Ring, your choice. Peer into the Abyss is 4 and 3 black for a sorcery. Target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and loses half their life, rounded up each time. This is just a great way to win the game. You just do this and go, boom. Here's enough 0-drops to win me the game. And now let's get to your instants. Pact of Negations is 0-drop for an instant that counters, but you gotta counters any target spell, but you gotta pay 5 your next turn. An Offer You Can't Refuse is 1 blue for an instant that counters a non-creature spell, but that controller gets 2 treasures. Dark Ritual is 1 black for an instant that gives you 3 black. Demonic Consultation, I'm not even going to read what it necessarily does. It just combos with Oracle because you name a card and exile your entire deck. Name a card, remove the top 6 cards of your library from the game, and reveal the next card to all players. If it is the card name, put it into your hand, otherwise removed from the game. And continue revealing cards from the library until you reveal cards. So you just name like Tarmogoyf, who's not in the deck, and boom, your Oracle hits the field with it there. But it's also okay because you can like name a card, and as long as it's not the top 6, you can reveal it for win, or to protect yourself from or stop someone from winning. Enlightened Tutor is 1 white for an instant. Search your library for an artifact or enchantment card. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Reveal it and put it on top. I just grab Soul Ring with this, or the One Ring, your choice. Flusterstorm is, or like I guess technically any of the like Mox Amber works too. Flusterstorm is 1 white or 1 blue for an instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell, unless its controller pays 1 storm. So if like there's a lot of spells being casted, you can get a lot of card numbers pointed at something. And it's hard to counter it because all of them are copies. It's not just one guy. Into the Flood Maw is 1 blue for an instant, gift a tapped fish. You may promise an opponent a gift as you cast a spell. If you do, they create a 1/1 blue fish creature token before its other effects. Return target creature and opponent controls to its hand. If the gift was promised, instead return target non-land permanent opponent controls to its own hand. So you can just bounce a creature, but you can also bounce any non-land permanent if you give them a fish. Mental Misstep is 1 Phyrexian blue, so you can counter a spell with mana value 1. Mystic Tutor, with mana value 1. Mystical Tutor is 1 blue for an instant. Search your library for an instant or sorcery. Reveal it, put it on top of your library. Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares both do similar things. They're both 1 white. They both exile a target creature. Path lets them go grab a land and put it on the battlefield tapped, and Swords gives them life equal to their power. Its power. Silence is 1 white for an instant. Your opponents can't cast spells this turn. Swan Song is 1 blue for an instant. Counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell. Its controller gets a 2/2 bird. Vampiric Tutor is 1 black for an instant. Search your library for a card, then shuffle your library and put it on top. You lose 2 life. This allows you to just do it on your opponent's end step and then draw it at your draw step. Board Upon the Wind is a great card in this deck. 1 and a blue for an instant. You may cast spells this turn as though they had flash. Draw a card. This works with a lot of like Peer into the Abyss and well, not necessarily Peer into this, but with like your Necropotence. So that way, if you can cast Peer into the Abyss before you go to discard Alpha Necropotence, you can keep playing because instant speed. Cyclonic Rift is 1 and a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. And then Overload for 6 and a blue. That 1 target becomes all non-land permanent your opponent's control. Tainted Pack is 1 and a black for an instant. Exile the top card of your library. You may play that card. You may put that card in your hand unless it has the same name as another card exiled this way. Repeat the process until you put a card into your hand, or you exile 2 cards of the same name, whichever comes first. Tainted Pack works, but you got to make sure you don't have multiple. I believe it doesn't work with basic lands because they'll share it. So you got to make sure you don't have too many of the same basic lands. Fierce Guardianship is 2 and a black for an instant. If you control your commander, you cast this without paying mana cost and counter target non-creature spell. Force of Negations 1 and 2 blue for an instant. And if it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay this card's mana cost and counter target non-creature spell. If that spell is countered with exile instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard, which is pretty gross. Saw in half is 2 and a blue, black for an instant destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are a copy of the creature, except their power is half, and that creature's power and their toughness is half the creature's toughness, rounded up each time. The cool thing with Saw in half is that you use it with your Dragon Broodlord to get 2 more cards off of Hoarding Broodlord. So that's 4 cards off of it. So you grab Saw in half with the first card with Broodlord, then Saw in half cuts it into 2 to grab 2 card combo. Sink into Stupor is 1 and 2 blue for an instant. Return target spell or non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Pretty decent, but 3. Why would you run it? Because it's also a blue land that can come in by paying untapped if you pay 3 life. So it's not the best return spell, but it does double as land. Deadly Rollick is 3 and a black for an instant. If you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Exile target creature, so free exile. Mindbreak Trap is 2 and 2 blue for an instant trap. If an opponent casts 3 or more spells this turn, pay 0 rather than pay this mana cost. Exile any number of target spells. So anything on the sack, you can just get rid of them. And it's not a counter, so it's can't be stopped by, like, you can't counter my spell. Force of Will is 3 and 2 blue for an instant. If you pay 1 life, or you may pay 1 life and exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay the small mana cost. Counter target spell. So just a great way to counter a spell. Artifacts. Chrome Mox is a 0 that enters the battlefield. When it enters the battlefield, you have to exile a non-artifact, non-land card from your hand, and then it taps for any of the colors in that, which isn't bad. It's pretty good. Lotus Petal is a 0 that taps, and you sacrifice it, and you get any color. Mox Diamond's a 0 that enters the battlefield. You have to discard a land, and it taps for any color. Mox Opal is a 0 that taps for any color, but you have to have 3 or more artifacts, including itself, so just 2 other artifacts. Mana Vault's a 1-drop that's an artifact that it doesn't untap during your untap step, and it will deal 1 damage to you if it's untapped at your upkeep, but then for 4 you can untap it, and it taps for 3 colorless. Soul Ring is 1 blue, or 1 colorless for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. Arcanes are 1 generic. 2 generic for an artifact that taps for any color in your commander's identity. Fel Restorance's 2 generic for an artifact that taps for any color a land your opponent's control can produce. Grim Monolith is 2 generic for an artifact that doesn't untap during your untap step, but does tap for 3 mana, and for 4 you can untap Grim Monolith. Talisman of Dominus is 2 generic for an artifact, and you can tap it for a colorless, or you can tap it for a blue or a black, but it deals damage to you. Talisman of Progress is the same thing, but for a white or a blue, and then you really need blue. That's why you don't run the white-black. Wishclaw Talisman's 1 and a black for an artifact, and whenever it enters the battlefield, it enters with 3 wish counters, and you can pay 1, tap it, remove a wish counter, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and then you can give this card to an opponent, but it's tapped so they can't use it, and that usually just wins the game. And then the 1 ring is 4 generic for a legendary artifact with indestructible, and it enters the battlefield. If you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn, and at the beginning of upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burning counter on the 1 ring, and you can tap it to put a burning counter on it and draw a card for each burning counter on it. So it does deal damage to you over time, but eventually you just draw enough cards to win the game. The 1 ring is such a good card. Enchantments. Blood Chief's Ascension is 1 black for an enchantment, as long as each opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest count, as long as at each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Blood Chief's Ascension. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Blood Chief's Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. So this is a great way to just start harming your opponent. Mystic Remora is 1 blue for an enchantment. Community upkeep 1, so you pay 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. And whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card unless they pay 4. Blind Obedience is 1 in a white for enchantment. Extort, so whenever you cast a spell, you can play white or black to drain each person for 1. So you gain 3, they each lose 1. And then artifacts and creatures you put in control into the battlefield tap, which slows them down. Necropotence is 3 black for enchantment. Skip your draw step. Whenever you draw a card, exile the card. Whenever you discard a card, exile the card from your graveyard. Pay 1 life, exile the top card of your library face down, put that card onto your hand at the beginning of your next end step. This card is just all about, like, removing everything from your hand and just going for a win, using a way to give stuff instant speed. Rhystic Study is 2 in the blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1 generic. Smothering Tides is 3 in a white for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2 generic. If the player doesn't, you create a treasure token. So that's just good ways to get treasure. And then your lands, you'll see your like basic lands here. The one land I was talking about is down here. It's Tarnished Citadel. That when you tap it for any color, it deals 3 damage to you. So that's 4. So that'll trigger your commander. So that's the deck. Let's talk about it. Is the deck good? Right? Yeah, it's okay. I don't think you want to go to a tournament with this deck. There's better cards to run in a tournament. But I do think it's kind of a cool idea to run an interesting commander in CEDH. And this is doing that. It's still that Esper pool, that Esper win con, but you have some fun other ways to win the game. Flickering the, or not flickering, infinitely casting the One Ring to give yourself protection, but then also like trigger your commander to drain everyone is a fun way to win the game. It's just like boom, 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 boom for the, like you're putting the ring on. I mean, here's my ring, right? So it's like ring on, off, ring on, off, ring on, off, just like, oh look, you're all dead. That's kind of the concept with her for that fun win con. But other than that, she's just a control deck. I love control decks. I love them. I love stacks. It's my favorite way to play Magic. It's why, but I only really run them in Power 4, Greater for Commander, and my modern deck is a weird Orzhov food control deck. So attrition. I kind of like attrition more than control, to be fair, and that's kind of like what your style is. It's like your style is like a control attrition deck, but attrition against 3 other players isn't great, and that's where you're losing it. Like, you're relying on your opponents to also stop your other opponents from winning. And in this format, that happens. A lot of times someone goes to a win and they get stopped. And then like someone else goes for a win and they get stopped. And you're sitting there just like slowly dealing damage, stopping people from being able to win. And then you just kind of, oh, you guys all tried to win and we all stopped you guys? Cool. Win. So you're not winning first here, you're winning last. But it's still a win. So hold up your ways to stop people from winning with this deck. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace.